Given your different backgrounds and contexts, what are some of the challenges you've each encountered in the different regions you've worked in? And how do safeguarding principles and policies perhaps differ between these different regions? Who'd like to open that one?
So I can go ahead on that one. So I'm currently in Vietnam, and this is the only country in which I have held a safeguarding position in. So I can really only speak to what I've encountered here in this part of the world. With regards to some of the challenges, here in Vietnam, there's this concept of losing face. So not wanting to embarrass yourself or sort of, be looked down on. And so matters, regarding well-being, psychology, counseling, safeguarding, it's very difficult to get through to parents that some of these issues that they do not believe are safeguarding issues are. So to get them to accept it and to actually acknowledge that some things that they might be doing could be considered harmful towards their children has definitely been a struggle. And simply in this part of the world, mental health and safeguarding child protection is just not well understood yet. So there's been a lot of barriers just to try and to get parents to see that, for example, using physical punishment can be considered physical abuse. To them, it's, well, my parents did it to me and their parents did it to them, and this is how it is, so sort of butt out. That's definitely been a challenge. But being able to come forth with research that's not Vietnam based, that's not US based. This is worldwide research statistics that show that these types of issues affect children of all ages, of all races, in all different parts of the world. That's really helped me overcome some challenges when it comes to having parents get on board. And with regards to principles and policies, that's a really difficult question that I'll have to think about a little bit more. So I'll pass the floor on to someone else.
I think picking up on what you've said there, Jennifer, when I think of some of the challenges that we encounter as a boarding school in the southeast of England, I think what you've described there, if we have an overarching concept, is the normalization of what's happening to those young people, because it's happened to them and therefore they don't see it as unusual. And I think that's something that we struggle with, and one of the particular issues as a school I think that we deal with quite regularly are things that are happening outside of school at parties, and then we get the fallout of those issues within school. And I think one of the areas that we've had to really address is actually educating our parents about what the appropriate things are and the measures that they should put in place in order to ensure that their parties are safe, and about getting them to realise that some of the behaviours that they think might be normal aren't and are actually a little bit unsafe. So it was a really interesting parallel there between what you were describing and what we see, but in a very, very different area, in a different context. And, I think one of the biggest issues that we also have when dealing externally is that we have such different thresholds and such different policies and procedures depending on which local authority we're dealing with. Wellington College sits on the border of 3 counties, so we're very often dealing with 3 local authorities, which are very, very different. But also because our borders have got addresses in different areas of the country, then we have to deal with different safeguarding boards and with different children's services, and that can often be a challenge. First of all, in order to actually understand what the different thresholds are between different local authorities, but also the form filling and the paperwork can be vastly different from one region to another as well. So I think that's something that we it's not a struggle, but it's a challenge.
I'm probably going to sound like I'm piggybacking off Jennifer and Delith there, but that's probably because, irrespective of where we come from, there are some things that are universal. So how we experience, trauma is universal. How we experience risk is universal. But I think children don't always have the access to the same rights. And I think in our part of the world, that's the UAE, for example, where we've got 202 nationalities. And I think Dalit also alluded to this in what she said. The definitions of what is acceptable and what is not are so varied. So for us, consent, it is not even a concept in the Asian subculture, right? The threshold of being 18 is not relevant in so many other parts of the world. The age of consent is different. Is underage drinking acceptable? So the definitions are so varied, and I think one of the challenges we faced initially is not having something that is binding, so law, legislature, statutory guidance, which are relatively new to our parts of the world, which perhaps have been around for Western countries. So now having that is a lot helpful and gives us a lot of systems and ways with which, even a common language with which we can articulate what's happening and what we need to do to address those issues.
Yeah, and if I can just jump back on there, as I'm going to piggyback on what some of the things both of you have said. But so I come from Canada, and that's a developed country, and I'm now working in a developing country. And so talking about policies and whatnot, we have policies at our school, but those policies mean nothing beyond the walls of our school. We do not have local authorities. We do not have child protection services. So we do the best we can within the four walls. But it's quite difficult. Back in Canada, some of the issues that I've dealt with, child protective services would be called right away. We would be able to do welfare checks on students who have been absent for a prolonged period of time without, a reason. Here, I was personally asked if I wanted to go to the house of a child, and I didn't feel so comfortable doing that, but I would have if it came to that. But yes, it's we all come from different backgrounds. We're all in different parts of the world, but definitely coming from a developed to a developing country, it can be very, very challenging. I'll just leave it at that.
And just sort of touching on a few of those sort of cultural challenges you mentioned, I don't know if there's any further light that you can shed on that, but it'd be great to hear about maybe some of the ways perhaps you've looked to overcome these challenges. So yeah, it'd be great to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, I think our challenges here are going to be so different culturally to what that you two are experiencing. And I think that there are two challenges here. I'm going to take them both separately. We've got an internal challenge. So internally, with staff and students reporting concerns. So students, child-on-child abuse, that sort of thing. And then staff thinking maybe about concerns about colleagues, so looking at low-level concerns. And I think on the student side of things, we do a survey every year, and what comes forward every year is their reluctance to what they see as perpetuating a snitch culture. And so what we've had to really do there is actually talk about how important it is to call people out and then call them in on their behaviours. And so it's been very much about arming them and giving them a toolkit on which to do that. And we've recognised that particularly around sex and consent, where we've trained ambassadors to deal with this specific issue, it's when they feel that there's enough in number to be as a part of that movement, then they feel much more comfortable in doing that. And I think that's what we've built on within the staff culture as well, actually making staff feel that they will be heard, they will be listened, and they will be given a safe space. And that culturally has enabled us, I think, to move over that bridge, and has actually increased reporting both within the student body and the staff body. We saw it mirrored, and what was really interesting was, I don't know if there's a correlation between one or the other and which one came first. So did increased staff reporting translate itself into the student body, or was it vice versa, or was it just everything together? And I think externally, the challenge that we have is very much about, I think in the past, we have deferred to the experts. So we've considered when we've got a police involved in an investigation or a child protection case, then actually the police might be the expert. And through experience, I've come to realize that it's not necessarily that that's the case, that we might be holding the expertise and the knowledge around that young person. And it's about having the confidence in order to say what we think might be better for that young person, and allowing us to drive the process rather than allowing the process to drive us. And that's been through a series of very difficult learning experiences, and recognizing that we sometimes are the experts in that as well.
So if I could just add to that, I think cultural shifts are really, really important, but they have to go hand in hand with, specific strategy as well. And I think that sort of balance between, long-term cultural shifts, but also short-term quick gains is very important. I'll give you an example. So some years ago, we had, concerns being reported via email. And, teachers felt that, I send an email and my work is done. But I think moving away from that was a huge step for us in terms of the quality and the accuracy of our reporting, because we said, A, it's not confidential if it's in an email. And we established a system within the school. It's an intranet system. It's completely confidential. Only the DSL and the deputy DSL have access to it. So they were happy that nobody else is going to have access to what I'm reporting. It's just two individuals. And moving away from just the dependence on email was a great strategy that it brought us to turnaround time of 48 hours. So we have everyone reporting concerns within 24 to 48 hours. We saw a 40% increase in the number of concerns being reported. And when we were able to share that data back with the teachers, they realized that there's so many things that we can spot. There's so many things that we can identify that may or may not lead to some sort of conclusive, outcome, but it's worth highlighting anyway. And I think that led to both the strategy being successful as well as over time, the culture changing, to Delit's point as well. So it helped the culture change over time, but it requires some, real strategic thinking as well.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that too. We implemented My Concern, which is a safeguarding reporting package that's quite extensively used across the UK now, and our levels of reporting went up too. We're actually just going back and revisiting a little bit because some of our staff don't have access to computers, so we're having to think about how we might re-engage those staff so that they feel comfortable and confident in reporting as well.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. So when I did my safeguarding training to all staff members at the beginning of the year, I said, if there's one message that I would like for you to remember at the end of this presentation, it's when in doubt, or if in doubt, report. And that means report on students if it's a cause for concern that you have. That means do a self-report if there's something that you might have done that could be misconstrued in a different way. If it's a low-level concern against another adult, please report. And as you mentioned, Sydney, we've also sort of changed how we or who has access to these types of reports. And this year is the first year that myself, the DSL, and my DDSL are the only ones that have access to things like self-reports and low-level concerns. And reminding staff that these are confidential, that these are not going to be seen. If you are doing a low-level concern on another adult, that adult will not know about it. We've seen a significant increase in all types of reporting. When in doubt, report. Let that be a message to all those that are listening. It is better to report something than to not and regret it afterwards.
And that's really interesting. And when it comes to that reporting piece around making students feel comfortable about coming forwards, and Sydney, you mentioned that great initiative that you had put in there. It would be great to see how you therefore encourage students in other ways to report safeguarding issues of what is such a tricky thing to sort of deal with, I suppose, if you're a young student, young adult. It'd be great if you could speak to some of those.
So this is my favorite topic, so stop me whenever you need to. But I think a big shift happened for us when we involved children in the safeguarding process. We developed what is now the Children's Safeguarding Team, and gave them the responsibility of educating the community, establishing some sort of systems in place for themselves, because it wasn't about us doing things or putting things in place for them, but working with them to say, what can we do to make your experience better? And we have something along the lines of a design thinking challenge in the school, across the school, from grade 5 to 12. And that's something that we put to the kids, and they came up with an online platform that is anonymous, but children still have to log in with their school credentials. So that's a safety mechanism in place. They own the back end of the website, and all of them are trained by a wellness and mental health clinic here called Lighthouse Arabia. So they're certified mental health first aiders who work anonymously. They run the website anonymously. So when the concerns come in from the student population, they're already trained to deal with those concerns. And if they're not able to address those issues, then they're trained to escalate it to our counselor. So I think giving children autonomy and getting them involved in the process has really been a monumental shift for us. In fact, we don't do anything around safeguarding and child protection without our children's involvement, to the extent that it's possible, because that has seen a huge shift in awareness, in understanding, in reporting as well. And I think it's been incredible to watch how their creativity and their innovation skills come to the fore, even in a challenge like this.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, Sydney, as well. We've got a group that works here called Culture Champions, and they've been looking at bystander apathy this term, and they've produced a newsletter, and they're doing an assembly about it. And I think long term, the way that we'd like to develop them, like you, is getting them to be. I think we may hit some issues in terms of maybe them dealing with the mental health side of things, but making the policies and things like that more student friendly and really getting them on board. I think you're so right. They come up with the most amazing ideas, and really creative as well. And I think them being able to report concerns confidentially is really important. We have a similar system here. It's called Whisper, and they can use that to report anything confidentially to us. But I also think that there is a real need for us and our safeguarding teams to be really approachable, being out there so that they can see that we are on their side, we're helping them, we're nice people that they can come, and so that they get the opportunity to build that trust as well. And the other element that I just add before I finish is that one of the barriers, I think, to reporting safeguarding issues for young people is they don't know what's going to happen with their information, and they make themselves hugely vulnerable. I heard somebody once say that vulnerability, and the essence of vulnerability, is giving somebody your story when you don't know what they're going to do with it. And I think safeguarding is so much about that. And so really educating the young people about what's going to be done with their information once we have it, and the supportive process that's going to be put in place, I think is really, really important as well.
I'm going to jump on what you said, Delight, about being approachable. I was going to say building relationships, building rapport. I'm new at this school. This is my first academic year, and I spent the good part of the first 2 months just going into classrooms, making my presence known, making the students know who is Miss Jennifer, what does Miss Jennifer do, how can Miss Jennifer help you. And so I definitely, I believe that to be in this role, it's not just to be knowledgeable about safeguarding and about child protection, but having that approachability, that students feel comfortable to come and to disclose, private information to you. One thing that I have sort of advocated to my students is that if they ever come to disclose something, so I'm the counselor and DSL, so I've got two different hats on. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't, and that's okay. If a student doesn't know who they're coming to see, that's fine. I'll be the one to decide that afterwards. But I always like to give them some power. So if they disclose some kind of safeguarding issue to me, I'm going to say, thank you very much for sharing this with me. What would you like me to do? So instead of telling them, this is what I'm going to do, I ask them, what would you like me to do? I ask permission if their parents might be, if I could contact their parents and have a meeting about this. Is it okay if I inform? So, and I found that has really, really helped me to gain the trust of students, because too often policies are followed too closely, and sometimes you have to go between the lines, sometimes you have to go outside of the lines. It is case by case. And so I just feel as if, building those relationships, as you said, being approachable and giving the students some power in what to do with the information that they're disclosing has helped us with our disclosures here.
And looking at some, I suppose, some of the sort of the key examples that you've worked in your different schools, and you can go into as much detail or as little as you feel comfortable in doing, but it'd be great to hear a bit about some of the safeguarding issues that perhaps each of you have encountered in your different school settings.
I think so. So just going back to putting a system in place and having technology, do some of the work for us has really helped, because now when we have parents or adults reporting, we require them to put in a level of detail that was not there previously. So actually specify, is this a, abuse issue, or is this neglect, or are you seeing self-harm? So having those subcategories in place just makes it easier for us to, dive into the data and look at what exactly is going on across, vertically, horizontally as well. So, for example, during the pandemic, we saw an increase in mental health issues or, abuse at home. Those kind of things came out strongly during the pandemic. When we came back from the pandemic, we saw that social issues and peer-on-peer issues were heightened because of the 2 or 3 year gap that kids were not meeting each other, and this was a new experience for them. So I think those are some of the things that have come across strongly in the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of online issues in the last couple of months as well, and I think all of those are connected. They sort of follow a trajectory as well. But I think the key for us was the detailed reporting. The more information we have to work with, the better our understanding of situations are. We can spot trends. We help, the counseling department, proactively plan to address some of those issues in the work that they do. So I think that has really been a great help for us.
Wow, gosh, I can, what I was going to say absolutely just mirrors what Sydney's just said. So the issues that we've been dealing with specifically really over the last couple of years have been mental health related. A huge spike, particularly in the controlling type behaviors, eating disorders, OCD, depression, anxiety. Very difficult to say how much of those are born out of the pandemic and how much we would have seen anyway. How much is that they're in greater number, or how much is due to increased reporting and wanting to talk about mental health. I think we certainly saw a rise in boys thinking that it's now okay to speak about their mental health. So I think, again, it's probably a combination of the two, online issues as well, and also the lack of social awareness around some of the issues that would have expected them to have negotiated earlier on, which they didn't because they were in lockdown, are now coming to play a little bit further up. So that's relationship and friendship issues in particular, and not really knowing how to navigate them because they haven't had those skills that they'd have had earlier on, I think. So yeah, I think it doesn't seem to matter where in the world you are. I think it looks like the issues certainly for me and Sydney are the same. Jennifer, I don't know about you.
Well, I'm working in a primary school setting. So I used to work in a K-12. Now it's early years to grade 5. So not seeing as much of the mental health issues as I would maybe in some of the older grades. That's not to say that there aren't, but everything that you've said so far, we are experiencing the effects of the pandemic now. We are seeing it in the children now, and their lack of social skills and their lack of understanding how to play, proper play with one another, in having spent too much time online, and so inappropriate topics that are that are not appropriate to the child's age, that we're sort of having to come in and sort of talk to them about. For us, I would say in the 6 months that I've been at the school, major safeguarding issue is really parental abuse and neglect, more so, and that can lead to some mental health, to distressing issues. But as I mentioned, I'm still in a part of the world where corporal punishment is accepted and where there are no child protection laws outside of schools. And so, as I mentioned earlier, a parent doesn't see hitting their child as being wrong because that's a generational thing. It's been going on forever, and who am I, to say otherwise? I think we're all working in international school settings, yes. So there's affluent neglect. And that is a big, big new topic that even for my staff, when I talk to them about what affluent neglect is, they automatically go to neglect, parents not being able to provide basic needs to children. And I said, well, affluent neglect is not being able to provide basic emotional needs. Parents who are absent, parents who throw a tablet at their child when they're crying, so children don't even understand how to regulate their emotions. They're just fixed on electronics. So going back to, what were some of the strategies I think both of you mentioned, or I think Delilah might have been you, is educating parents. Because as both counselor and DSL, what I'm noticing is when I meet with parents, the piece of the puzzle is there. Like a lot of the times the issues that I'm dealing with stem from what's happening outside of school, not necessarily what's happening in school. So as much as I can get in front of parents, whether that's in discussions or workshops, face-to-face, online, drip feeds that I do through our social media, pages, any kind of bit of information that we can provide to parents, we're finding that that's where we need to put a lot of our safeguarding focus, parents and staff members. All of us here are safeguarding experts, but our staff are not, and we can't expect them to be. So, making sure that staff are continuously reminded of, warning signs to look out for and what to do versus what not to do if a safeguarding issue comes to you. I feel that, constant reminders are what's necessary on the parent side, on the student side, and on the staff side.
It'd be great just to sort of look at those sort of strategies. I know we've touched on it a little bit earlier in the conversation, but just sort of diving a bit deeper into those and sort of looking at the different strategies that you've each put in place to sort of help alleviate some of the issues that you've also just spoken to. It'd be great to hear about that, some of those sort of practical and actionable strategies that you put in place, and maybe a little bit about some of the outcomes that you've seen from those. If you've gained outcomes from them already, it'd be great to hear about those, because I know that listeners to this will find it incredibly useful and insightful.
So I think one of the things that has really worked for us is a strategy that came from our student group, actually. They said they came to us and they sat with us and they said, a lot of the reading material we share with parents is sometimes heavy. It's not easy to read and go through. Sometimes it's disturbing and not necessarily something that parents want to read. So we came up with a strategy of giving parents practical tips that they could use. So the kids worked on, how do you ensure that your child's social media is safe? What are the telltale signs to know your child is being bullied online? And so we do a weekly update to parents on practical things like what's available on Netflix right now, and what should your child be watching or not watching. And I think those are the things that parents have now started looking forward to receiving, so that they're more aware. Otherwise, parents can sometimes be unaware of the things that are available to their children. And I think looking at shows that are available, looking at video games that are in the market, looking at trends across the world, or what's happening on TikTok that could be a potential threat to your child. I think that's something that has really taken the parent community aback, because they realize now that kids have access to so much content that is absolutely could be so dangerous to their children that they didn't have awareness of before. And I think that strategy really worked for us. So we've toned down the research and the reading and all of those things, and we've amped up the practical strategies that parents can use for conversations at home, and of course, safety measures that they can take as well.
Sydney, if you don't mind me asking, you talked about weekly messages that you're delivering to parents. How, on what platform are you doing that? Because I did talk about the importance of educating parents, but what we're noticing is when we do host workshops around safeguarding, we don't draw a lot of parents to these safeguarding. When it's academic, yes. When it's safeguarding, no. Our newsletter from our head of school, of which I am quite active on as DSL, also we found that are not being read by too many people. So how are you best engaging these parents, and do you know that with these messages you're delivering, they are being received? You're able to actually evaluate that?
Yeah. So like you said, our whole school newsletter gets less readership. It's not something that goes out to all the parents as it should. A lot of parents don't even see it in their emails. But what really gets the best readership is our grade level newsletters, because we do an end of week update from our team leaders, and they talk about everything that has happened over the past week and everything parents need to know for the week ahead. And I think that's something that parents look forward to. It's the one-stop shop for all the information they need to be aware of everything that's going on. I think that's where we put our safeguarding updates as well. We also do a bi-weekly video from the principal. A lot of parents don't like to read, we figured, but they do have time to go through a 7-minute video on YouTube while they're in the car or while they're dropping their kids to school. So we do a bi-weekly video update from the principal and key members of our staff, and we try and drip feed some information in there as well. I think the key for us was finding different formats and looking at which formats work for which age group. So when we want to send out messaging to children, we rely heavily on Instagram. That's where the children are. They follow our official school Instagram page. So we use that heavily for our messaging to children. When it's with parents who are really, really involved in school life, the newsletters work really well. But there's a group of parents, there's a cross-section that rely on video updates and updates on Facebook. We see a lot less engagement on Facebook than we see on other platforms. But knowing where your audiences are, who's reading or who's consuming what kind of content on which format is, I think, key to getting your message across, because one format may not work for everybody.
Yeah, we had the same problem actually, Jennifer. Actually reached out to our parents to ask them what they would read and what they would do. We're just in the process of actually, we do a termly newsletter. So gosh, all credit to you, Sydney, for doing it weekly. That's a real commitment. Our termly newsletter, I think it does get a reasonably good readership, but it's about engaging everybody. So we're going to do some podcasts again. So when people are walking the dog, or if they're watching their child play on the side of a football pitch, it might be something they're going to listen to. So that's the way that we're going to approach it. The other thing which I think has worked well for us here, particularly that thinking around about the safeguarding team, is that we now have reflective meetings. So if we've had a particularly difficult case to deal with, we will now sit down and have a lessons learned meeting, and we will each one of us will look at what we feel we've learned personally, but also professionally from a particular case where we feel that we might have done something differently, or even actually look at whether a decision that was made was appropriate and the reasons behind that. We trialed last year doing it slightly differently, and it was largely because we couldn't get everyone together in the same room a particular moment in time. But we got feedback from each of the members of the safeguarding and pastoral team separately around different cases we'd looked at. And so when we actually got round to speaking about the cases, we didn't know who had said which bit. And it was really interesting. And I think it enabled everyone to feel that their voice was being equally heard. And we always look at those lessons learned meetings, and we think about how we might use those lessons in terms of policy review, practice changes. And we'll often go out, if it's appropriate, to the young person or the parents that have been involved in that case as well, to ask them what we could do differently to get some external feedback, so that we don't become too insular and inward looking. So that's something that's worked really well for us.
Brilliant.
I'm still relatively new in this role, so I'm trying to analyze data, what was done over the past years, what according to teachers and leadership team members has worked, what hasn't. But yeah, it's a learning process. And I also think too that the world we're living in today is not the same as it was a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so, we sort of need to change with the world. And so we're we're in our second term now, and the students are finally settling in, and so we're able to look at things a little bit differently now. And definitely we will have some changes to our policies for next year. But for this year, being the first full uninterrupted academic year, keep our fingers crossed, we're not done yet over the last 3 years. It's we sort of needed to see what we were dealing with, and I think we've got a good idea of that. So moving forward, it's how can we best support students and parents in this new world post-COVID that we're living in.
That leads me perfectly onto the next question, really, just sort of, and the last question. So looking forwards into the future, what do you foresee as some of the maybe the key challenges around safeguarding in each of your institutions, or maybe just more generally as sort of general trends going forwards?
Do you know, that's a really interesting question, and I really struggled with that. I think every year we sort of try to predict, what might happen based on trends and patterns in previous years. I think safeguarding is at a really interesting point in the UK at the moment, in that we are definitely seeing there's an increased awareness across the whole country around safeguarding, particularly around sexual violence and sexual harassment. I think for me, I almost sense there's something big that might happen over the next couple of years. But I think maybe as a general pattern, as a general trend, I think what we're seeing now is that when the time is right, if there is an issue, I think people's voices are now being heard. And I think that the big challenge, or the issues that will come to safeguarding, will be areas where people have maybe not felt heard in the past, and now the time is right for them to be heard. So that's an extremely poor answer, but me basically saying, I don't really know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. But as Jennifer's just alluded to, it's about safeguarding is about being proactive. So where you do know what the issues are in your setting and in your area, how you might prevent them, and that really crucial groundwork that you can do that. But it's also allowing enough flexibility to be reactive to the issues that are arising as well. So maybe not a great answer. I think my 3-word answer would be, I don't know.
So hold on, you just, I don't know either, but you used the word proactive when talking about safeguarding, which is what it is. It's proactive as opposed to child protection, which is more reactive. And I think that one of the main challenges that I'm seeing from safeguarding is a lot of the work that I'm doing, my team and I are doing, is reactive. So how do we get to that proactive? How do we get to the beginning part so that we don't have to deal from a reactive sort of point that we're seeing? So I think that's the biggest challenge, is getting ahead of the problem instead of having to deal with it once it's already there. So, but as Delight said, I don't really know either. So yeah, it's a very good question, and I think one that as time goes on and as new challenges arise, the answer will change.
I think if every DSL had a crystal ball, that would help in all the work that we do. But for me, I think, so one, I'm going to choose my words carefully here, but, we've seen a rise in a particular kind of case in the UAE here. But based on where you live and where you're working, I think working within the parameters of what legislation and statutory guidance allows, not approaching certain issues and topics because the laws of the land perhaps don't allow it, is a gray area for us. So what can we address? What should we address? What should we ignore because we're not allowed to, and yet be supportive of kids who are going through, a bunch of experiences or risks in different ways that may not have, written policy around, is something that is personally an issue that we will have to think about going forward. Having said that, I think also, while we've seen increase in reporting, I think there's still a lot of societal stigma, shame, belief that family issues should stay within the family, whether you're Asian or Emirati or Arab, or some of those cultural things join us, because it's the same irrespective of where you live or where you come from. And I think so while we are seeing increased reporting, I don't think we see accuracy of reporting. I think we still need to work with stakeholders to see details coming out in those reports, so that the mechanisms we put in place or the support we're able to provide meets the need, so to speak, as opposed to being some sort of a generic quick fix to a problem that is actually deeper, or deeper rooted in something that we haven't identified. So the quality of reporting, and I think working our way as counselors, as teachers, as educators, still being able to support kids despite legislation, guidance, the laws of the land, etc.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing those insights. Super valuable, and obviously an area that members all around the world are sort of thinking about very strongly in their different school settings. So yeah, hugely appreciate you sharing that, and yeah, maybe hopefully we can do a part 2 session soon. But yeah, if there's any final thoughts, then do jump in. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for joining, and yeah, looking forward to a part 2 session soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
I think I must say, I know where the three of us are here, but the work is really an army. There's an army of people behind us who do everything that we talked about. So while we're here as the face of safeguarding and child protection, really credit goes to people on the ground, teachers, parents, caregivers, adults who put all of this in place and make sure kids receive the support that they do.
Yeah,
Well said.